They're all named on different crafts in different languages. If you could see, this is painter in Italian, so pretty cool concept. Hey everybody, this is JDGaming, back today with a Let's Build of Witchcrafter. Now, full disclosure, the only reason I initially picked this deck up was after I bought my Megaton case this year. I only needed to pay like $5 in order to pick up the rest of the cards, so it's basically I built the deck for a booster pack. You can't expect this type of a deck, based on its price of course, to do that well, right? Or can you? Well, there are two really fun reasons I wanted to share this deck today. One is because it has a very interesting spell recycling mechanic that's unlike what we've seen even in Sky Strikers or spell books and other spell-based strategies in the past. So it's a fresh new mechanic, so if you like those kinds of things in Yu-Gi-Oh, this may be the deck for you to at least play around with for a bit. And the second thing I think is that it ended up impressing me. Although I went into the deck thinking, oh yeah, it can't be that good, and it does have its obvious flaws, honestly, it feels like a deck that should have been printed like 5 years ago if it wanted a chance. It ended up surprising me over time, and it became something that I wanted to kind of keep around with me. It wasn't just a one-time gimmick I played around with. I actually really like this deck, so I decided why not go ahead and do a Let's Build for you guys. So as always, I'm going to go and build the deck from the ground up and explain my choices, so even if you have no idea what any of these cards do, this video should give you everything you need to get a solid start on the theme. If you just want to see the list yourself, you can go ahead and use the chapter system or the description box. I have that table of contents as always. That'll take you over to the end of the video where I go through the entire list. So without further ado, let's build Witchcrafter. The first step in building any deck is to establish the theme and to build a core that supports the theme's goals. And to that end, we're going to try and set up this devious duo on board every single game. Witchcrafter Madame Verre is a mighty level 8 monster with 1000 attack, 2800 defense, and 2 very powerful quick effects. During battle between any of your spellcaster monsters and an opponent's monster, you can reveal any number of spells from your hand with different names. They don't even have to be Witchcrafter cards, and for each of those, your battling monster gains 1000 attack and defense for the entire turn, which does come up in this deck. In addition, she has another quick effect that says you can discard one spell from your hand to negate the effects of all face-up monsters your opponent currently controls until the end of the turn. Each of those is a hard once per turn, and unfortunately, that snapshot-like effect for effect negation means your opponent could continue playing if they end up having more things to do, and you time Madame Verre at an inopportune instance. But that's a very powerful ability, especially when you combine her with Witchcrafter 𝗗𝗍𝗔, a level 7 with 24 and 1000 for stats, who reads, your opponent cannot target any of your other spellcasters with card effects, and as a quick effect for the same discard cost of a single spell card, you can target one face-up card your opponent controls and destroy it, again, a hard once per turn, much like the other Witchcrafters. So you can kind of see the trend here. We're using spells in our hand in order to fuel these abilities, and by having a skill drain-like effect on command, in addition to a Zodiac Trident, you can pick apart your opponent's boards pretty easily with this combo. And so our goal is going to be bring these two cards out onto the field as quickly and efficiently as possible. To make sure that happens, we can play a deck full of Lone Fire Blossoms, which is one big reason I love this strategy. We're starting off here with 3 copies of Witchcrafter 𝗗𝗏𝗄, a level 4 fire monster with 18 and 600. During the main phase, quick effect, you contribute this card, then discard one spell. Special summon any one Witchcrafter monster from your deck except another copy of herself, and of course, that is a hard once per turn ability as well. That first Lone Fire-like effect with the spell discard cost is the same among all of the small Witchcrafter monsters we're going to cover, so it's important that we look at this right here as just a one-time thing and realize this is what all these guys do, so there's a ton of consistency here. Then, once they're in the graveyard, they all have a unique ability that lets you banish them from the graveyard in order to claim some bonus. That helps you recover the cost of the card. So 𝗗𝗏𝗄 lets you banish her from the graveyard in order to Foolish Burial Goods any Witchcrafter card from your deck to the grave. It could be a spell, as it often is, or it could even be something like Verre or 𝗗𝗍𝗔 if you want to use a revival ability to retrieve them, which does come up a ton in this strategy. The next monster we're playing with the same Lone Fire ability is Witchcrafter 𝗗𝗍𝗔. She's a wind level 1 monster with 300 and 500. Interesting thing, she is a different version of the monster. I think it's like Servant of Endymion, so if you guys guys like trivia. Her graveyard ability is you can banish her along with one of your Witchcrafter spells in order to have this card's effect become that Witchcrafter spell's ability. And that's important for two reasons. Not only does that let you go and use the ability of a card you may have discarded to use either 𝕮𝖃𝖊𝖊𝗍 or some other Witchcrafter's search effect, but you can also use the ability of that card without counting towards the once per turn limit, and that lets you do a lot of cool combos. We're only playing 2 because if I looked holistically at the deck and the number of Witchcrafter monsters, I ended up having this card being at 2, making the deck be at 10 monsters total, which was the best in my testing. You don't want to open up with a ton of monsters in this deck because they all do the same thing anyway, and you need to have a handful of as many spells as possible so you can use those abilities. So Jenny is at 2 here. You could honestly play 3 if you wanted. She's definitely one of the stronger ones. I like playing 1 copy each of Pottery and Petoir, Potter and Painter, all Witchcrafters, so they're different artisans, probably own their ateliers somewhere. They're all named on different crafts in different languages. You can see this is Painter in Italian, so pretty cool concept. But the reason we play these is because 1, they are both Lone Fires again. 2, they are Earth and Water attribute, which does come up for something fun I'm doing in the extra deck. And then 3, they have their own unique abilities that you can toolbox at any time. Pottery is a little more restrictive because she requires you to have no cards in your hand, but in the event that happens, which sometimes it does, mainly when you don't brick, you're able to go and banish her in order to add any Witchcrafter card from your graveyard to hand. Then Petoir, the Painter, lets you go and do like a mini Allure of Darkness, lets you banish her to draw 1 card, then you have to send a Witchcrafter card from your hand to the graveyard, or if you have none, banish your entire hand. That's it for the monsters. We only have 7 normal summonables there, and the reason is we're playing 3 copies of Witchcrafter Creation, basically a Rhoda. And then this also sets a trend that all the Witchcrafter spells have. So in addition to being able to add a Witchcrafter monster from deck to hand, during the end phase, if you have not already used this card's other effect, you can go ahead and add it from your graveyard to your hand as long as you control a Witchcrafter monster. You don't lose anything in that process. Over time, once you have multiple monsters on the field and you're not needing to use the spells for anything other than discards, you get them all back in the end phase and you suddenly get like 3 or 4 cards back to your hand all at once, which is the fun with this strategy. The secret is, can you get to the later stages of the game where you're just going to inevitably win with the advantage of this pendulum-like recursion? You may be thinking, well, no, duh, JD, you want to play 3 Rhodas. Well, the reason I specifically like it here is because of that extra nuance. You want to make sure you see the spells over monsters. The next important Witchcrafter card is Unveiling. This quick play spell has, of course, that recursion ability, but its main ability is special summon a Witchcrafter from your hand, and if you do, your opponent is no longer able to respond to your spellcaster monster effects for the rest of the turn. It helps you get rid of 𝗗𝗊𝗊𝗓 or Verre that are stuck in your hand, place them right on the board where you want them instead, and it gives you kind of an extra summon as well. So all around, really fantastic card. This card is mainly there to help protect you against Ash Blossom. You don't really care about effect failure or infinite impermanence in this particular strategy because the way these cards are worded, these are main phase quick effects on all of your little monsters. So if I get hit by effect failure, I can chain this ability, tribute 𝗵𝗇, discard a spell, and I still claim that ability because at resolution of effect failure, there's no monster on the field for her to negate, so she fizzles out. Same thing with infinite impermanence and a lot of these other cards. Ash Blossom's really the only hand trap you care about because that will single-handedly just kill your search effect. You wasted your normal summon, you discarded a card, and even if you get that back, it still does hurt to 1-for-1 into your normal summon, gating you off for the rest of the turn. Plus, you know, Verre looks really smug in this picture, and so that's just really fun as well. I also like playing 1 copy of Witchcrafter 𝗿𝗊𝗓. Not everyone plays this, but I personally found in testing that this card's very important because whereas you're able to go and Witchcrafter monster search, you can't search for Unveiling directly, which is kind of one of the issues with this deck. You have to toolbox these guys from the graveyard, and that's really slow because you have to wait until your end phase. You couldn't have used that ability that turn. 𝗿𝗊𝗓 just being in the deck at 1 means any of my Witchcrafter monsters I mentioned can turn into this, and she has 2 really strong abilities. A quick effect that lets you discard the spell in order to summon a Witchcrafter from your hand, so kind of like Unveiling. It helps you unbrick your hand, bringing Verre or 𝗗𝗊𝗊𝗓 out to the board, or even a second Witchcrafter monster, depending on the setup of the game. And then she has an ignition effect. In addition to that, you contribute her to Monster Reborn, one of your spellcaster monsters. So that's really cool because 1, it's any spellcaster, and 2, she's able to either put back Verre or 𝗗𝗊𝗊𝗓 on board to complete your combo, or the way these quick effects work, let's say the 𝗿𝗊𝗓 gets you access to Madame Verre. Normally it'd be in defense position, but I'll put it here for room like this. You put her on board, and then you tribute 𝗿𝗏, and maybe you bring back the, I don't know, like the 𝗵𝗍 that you ended up using that turn in order to bring out the 𝗿𝗏. Now you're able to, during your opponent's turn, use that same 𝗵𝗍 who's not hard once per turn restricted anymore during your opponent's main phase to go and tribute her, summon out the 𝗗𝗍, and you end up with both of these. So the way you end up with these two is through a lot of different means, but normally it's just going to be have a Witchcrafter monster, summon out one of them, and then somehow bring out a second Witchcrafter monster, whether it's from your hand with Unveiling, back from your grave with a Monster Reborn ability, or just using something like 𝗿𝗏 for the 2-for-1 combo. You know, you're able to go and bring both of these out very easily by having this card. That's why we want to go ahead and play one copy of 𝗿𝗏 in the deck. If she ends up being drawn and you don't have any other like big Witchcrafter, whatever, she's probably just going to sit there until the end of the game. The other ability though that she has is that Monster Reborn, which is replicated in Witchcrafter Holiday. This just lets you target a Witchcrafter in your grave and special summon it, and of course during the end phase lets you recur this card if you haven't used that ability as well. This is when you copy often with 𝗵𝗍, and you can notice here, let's say I summoned my 𝗵𝗍, right? I can go use 𝗵𝗍's effect, go ahead and summon Verre, and then I can use Monster Reborn here, the Holiday, to bring back the 𝗵𝗍. Sure, I can't use her ability in order to send another card to the graveyard in that instance, but this right here is also a combo that lets me go in next turn, summon out 𝗗𝗍, so that's the end board we want to end up with. Even in like a bad-ish situation, Holiday saves our hand and makes sure we can go ahead and do that. Then we have some one-ofs here. Witchcrafter 𝗵𝗍 is a continuous spell card that goes along with Scroll, the same recursion properties. If they're on the board, you can send them to the grave as if they were in your hand for a Witchcrafter ability, and if they're in the graveyard and you didn't use that effect that turn, you can go ahead and recycle them. Then as a continuous ability, Scroll lets you go and draw one card the first time your spellcaster monster destroys one of your opponent's monsters in battle, which sounds really good, but you just never really time this easily in this deck because you're probably recurring this for free in your end phase, which means unless your opponent suicides into you, you never pay it as cost during your opponent's turn. Wait all the way until your next turn. Yeah, you're not going to get that draw effect because again, this card's not searchable directly to your hand from your deck through any of the Witchcrafter cards. 𝗵𝗍, however, is very good because it says the first time each of your Witchcrafter monsters would die, either by battle or card effect, you can protect that card, and that's on each of your monsters. So when you send this to the graveyard with 𝗵𝗍, and you have access to 𝗗𝗍 and Verre, then you end up with a very scary board of can't target your other non-𝗗𝗍 monsters. Verre has a skill drain effect as a quick effect, and 𝗵𝗍 protects each of them from dying once, and then you have Verre's quick effect to protect your board with the battle effect as well. So that's what you're trying to send. If you have 𝗵𝗍 in your grave and you don't know what else to do, send 𝗵𝗍 to the graveyard. It'll save you 9 times out of 10. Even these continuous spells have that recursion ability. Again, straight to your board, so you can't power up Verre that way, but I don't think the 1000 attack matters all that much in most situations. You just care that you have this nice ability protecting and consolidating your board. Then we have these last two cards. Mainly we're playing one of each of these because they are, again, recurable because they're different Witchcrafter names, and they are pretty useful. Collaboration lets one of your Witchcrafter monsters make a second attack during each battle phase this turn, and it gives them like an Ancient Gear type of your opponent can't respond with spell or traps until the end of the damage step. The reason this is huge is because Verre lets you pump a monster's attack until the end phase, which means Collaboration can let that monster attack twice with the attack boost, and that's really big for ending games. Then we have Draping, which is a quick play spell that says target spells and traps your opponent controls up to the number of Witchcrafters, and then just bounce those cards on the field back to the hand. So kind of weird, right? If you're playing against something like Fogblade with Phantom Knights and stuff, then it's pretty good because you can just respond to it. Yes, your opponent gets their Fogblade back, then you're going to get this back to your hand anyway. If your opponent happens to be setting something that you expect to be infinite impermanence or just general back row, you can still use it against that. And of course, worst case scenario, you discard either of these as cards you may not use anyway, and you just get them right back. This is like your third or fourth free card you get back to your hand every single end phase, and so we want to play each of these. Like, if they make more Witchcrafter spell cards, it doesn't really matter what they do. If they have that same recursion ability, you're probably playing at least one copy of it in this deck because each one you see will get you so much advantage in the long run. Time to shift gears and talk about the rest of the main deck. We're starting off here with not necessarily the first card I would think of, but probably the most important in terms of where the extra cards can go into from here on out. 3 copies of Pot of Extravagance. This card's good because your extra deck right now doesn't have any mandatory cards. We're doing something fun that I am excited to share with you, but let's be honest, this deck doesn't have any themed cards in the extra deck, so you can probably afford to play this. The reason this is so powerful is, 1, it's a spell card, so worst case scenario, you just discard it, and 2, it gives you a +1, which then snowballs with all of the other cards that you can discard and recur each and every turn. That's also why I only wanted 7 normal summonable monsters and 3 creations. I didn't want to double draw monsters, even with drawing off of this. I want a handful of spells and like 1, maybe 2 Witchcrafters if that tops. This card's also very interesting because it does lock you out from drawing. However, 𝗵𝗇 sends to your graveyard and all your cards come back from the graveyard, so it doesn't really conflict with that. One thing I do want to talk about though that's interesting is Magician's Souls. I think Magician's Souls is a greedy kind of card here. The biggest benefits are you get a free body on board and you send either your Verre or 𝗗𝗍 to the graveyard, or heck, even 𝗿𝗏, and you can Monster Reborn that guy later with your holiday, and that does set up some nice things. But then you got to remember, even if you were able to discard, like, let's say Draping and Collaboration as just 2 spells in order to draw, those cards will come back, yes, and then you ended up getting 4 cards. 2 you drew plus the 2 you ended up getting back and not really losing, and that's insane. Except what if you get Ash Blossomed, right? If you get hit on Extravagance, okay, I just continue with my turn, and now Ash Blossom can't stop the rest of my plays, which is awesome. Versus if I summon Magician's Souls and I get that Ash Blossomed, yes, I will get these 2 cards back in the end phase, but I can't immediately use them anymore for my turn, and now I'm down Magician's Souls and these 2. I have to play with 2 cards, and even if everything else goes right, that means normal summon a Witchcrafter, discard my other card, my hand is empty, and I'm in trouble. So the fact that Extravagance prevents you from drawing further with Magician's Souls means you can't play them together. And between the 2, I figured having a spell that doesn't just lose you the game to Ash Blossom was more important. Extravagance is a cheaper card right now, has fewer risks. It's just the option I would prefer to go with. This is kind of a fork in the road, right? Because depending on what card you do, you're going to have to change how you build your extra deck, what other tech you may play in the main, on whether or not you're allowed to draw. But that's why, long-winded thing, we ended up getting Pot of Extravagance in here instead of Magician's Souls or anything else. The next 3 of we play is the very powerful Foolish Burial Goods. Although this does have a hard once per turn clause, it's kind of like Sky Striker where it's going to be useful no matter what, because in this case you get your Witchcrafter spell in the grave, that's going to come right back to your hand. The hard once per turn doesn't matter because you just discard this to claim your other Witchcrafter abilities as well. With that, I like playing 1 copy of Metal Foes Fusion. Although this card does get stopped with Pot of Extravagance, you don't always draw Extravagance, so when you Foolish Burial Goods and you have nothing else you want to grab at the moment, you just go and send Metal Foes Fusion. It is a free draw, and Metal Foes Fusion is interesting because if you discard this as a Witchcrafter card, you can recycle it to your deck and draw 1 card instantly, which is kind of like a Witchcrafter spell, but it's faster, so that's why I really like this card. Upstart Goblin's in here for a similar reason. I did like this over any other 40th card I could play in the deck. Gives you a boost in consistency that I think is significant across all your 3-ofs in the deck. One reasoning, this is probably my favorite card in this deck. I actually delayed this profile because I needed to pick this guy up. If you don't know what this does, because you haven't played Infernoids or haven't seen Pharaonic Guardian from way back in like 2003, your opponent has to call a monster level. You excavate until you hit a monster that can be normal summoner set. See if it matches the level. If your opponent called that level right, you have to send your card to the graveyard, but if they called it wrong, you special summon this. And now you have every level of monster basically. Jenny's a 1, Pottery's a 2, Petoir's a 3, 𝗵𝗇's a 4, you have 𝗿𝗏 as a 6, you have 𝗗𝗍 as a 7, and you have Verre is an 8. So then your opponent's got to think, well, are they going to try and hit 𝗵𝗇 because it's a level 4 and you play 3 of it? Are they going to try and hit Verre because that's the most annoying monster even though it's a 1 of in the deck? Either way though, any of the spells that you pick up are going straight to the graveyard, and you know what happens with every differently named Witchcrafter spell in this deck. This card is like the Joey Wheeler button in this deck that really makes it fun, and if this card ever comes to 3, oh my gosh, even if I'm not playing Witchcrafter at the moment, I'll probably drop what I'm doing and just play Witchcrafter again, because reasoning at 3 in this deck would just be so insane. Then we have Monster Reborn because, you know, you have Holiday anyway. This card's basically that, but it's a little more flexible. And then I wanted some cards to stop my opponent, so I'm playing 1 Psyframe Driver, of course. That means we're playing 3 copies of Psyframe Gear Gamma. This thing is very powerful for a few reasons. First of all, obviously it's good as like a, if you're going second, you can stop your opponent's plays during their turn and it destroys the threat, which makes it a good hand trap. But notice this thing's condition is you have to have no monsters on your field. I can play this in response to anything that may try and omni-negate my Witchcrafter Unveiling. Oh, because I have no monster on the field. Or how about I summon my important monster? Like, let's say I go and summon my Witchcrafter 𝗵𝗇, I tribute her off the field and discard a spell. Oh wait, now I have nothing on my board and my opponent's trying to Ash. You can Gamma that because you have no monsters and you meet the condition. So this card's really amazing in this deck in particular, not because it's good just like in every other deck, but because your initial play sequence you want to protect gets protected because of all your other monsters just leaving the field for their ability. abilities. And then the last 3 cards in the main deck are 3 copies of Super Polymerization. I went back and forth between this and either Forbidden Droplet or Dark Ruler No More. So first, Forbidden Droplet. That's the first thing on the chopping block, because although you may think it's fun to discard your cards that'll come back for free in order to blank your opponent's board, it's the same issue as with Magician's Souls, because if you discard your cards first and then you can't make a play because of it, it doesn't help you that you get all your cards in the end phase. So in that sense, Dark Ruler No More is much better. However, Dark Ruler No More requires you to actually get rid of your opponent's threats before you can do anything as well, and Super Poly, although a bit more narrow in scope, is very useful for getting rid of Link monsters, and especially dark monsters like Red Eye's Dark Dragoon. So that's why I wanted to do this, and you can still discard a spell for this card's cost, and then that will come back. So it's a little cheaper. It's kind of a meet me in the middle, gets rid of monsters, and makes it hard to respond. So this just helps you fight going second. The specific monsters I chose to use for this are the obvious trio here of Starving Venom, 𝕮𝗄𝗄 because this lets you eat up dark monsters, maybe including a fusion if your opponent has Dragoon, and Mud Dragon in the Swamp does the same kind of thing. This also lets you eat up IP Masquerena as a dark monster along with Dragoon, and I also like playing 1 copy of Earth Golem 𝗵𝗔𝗍 just to make sure I can stop IP Masquerena boards from being annoying as well. I have room in the extra deck, and this is another card that gives me options here. And beyond that, I wanted to play at least 3 cards, so at a minimum these 3, because with Extravagance, you have a very low chance of hitting all 3 or 4 of your extra deck targets, and this makes sure, since I'm main decking 3 cards that I would potentially be bricking my hand with if I got rid of every target, I just want to make sure I have a healthy number, and that's why I ultimately settled with 4. You could get away with 3 as well. For the Link monsters, these are all just tech options. They're important, but not important enough that you can't play Extravagance, is the way I'd put it. 1 Link Kuriboh because Jenny is a level 1, 1 Anima because Jenny is a level 1, and this card lets you steal monsters, which sometimes comes up, so, you know, might as well get rid of something along the way. 1 Salamangreat Almirage, which lets you go, and as long as you normal summoned anything except 𝗵𝗇, you're able to go and turn it into this. The reason I like all 3 of these is because there's not really a reason to max out on 1, I think, even with Extravagance. They're all pretty much interchangeable as I see it. Again, the idea of 3 copies makes it very unlikely you'll banish everything for the Extravagance, and then I like playing 1 of each of the Charmers. So this is probably the closest to a Charmer deck I will get to, and this is why I played the monsters that I did. Also as an Earth monster, so your Pottery is able to turn into her, Jenny into Wind, 𝗵𝗇 into Hida, and Patoir. Obviously this lets you go and play into basically whatever situation your opponent may have. They have something in the graveyard to link to your opponent's Needle Fibers. You just bring it back, and then you're able to go into Access Code Talker, make it be at least 4,300 attack, pop at least a card, maybe 2. That's why I really like this package. It lets you just play through basically any non-light or dark deck. Because I want to make it work, I actually play 2 copies of Area, because that way, even with Extravagance, I have a decent shot at going ahead and not banishing both. And even beyond that, I think the bigger picture idea is if you have Extravagance in your hand, but you know Access Code Talker is going to win you the game, just go for this combo. And if that's not going to win you the game, then you can go ahead and Extravagance, and you still have a shot that maybe Area into Access Code Talker is going to be something that's live for you after Extravagance. To make sure I don't lose everything, you could play second Access Code, but I never really felt I was missing that just because of the way I play the Extravagance. So instead, I wanted a little more variety. Unchained Abomination is another monster that just needs any 2 monsters, including a Link monster, which, again, your Charmers all are. And if a card on the field is destroyed by card effect, like Hina, you can go ahead and destroy 1 more card with this guy. During the end phase, it could just pop a card for free. If it destroys a monster in battle, you could pop a card. Like, this just gives you extra removal. That's why I like this, just for the variety in here. They're both just 2 material monsters to summon. And then the last card in here is Selene, Queen of the Master Magicians. This card is, of course, very easy to bring out with Needle Fiber, but I'm not playing that. Instead, I'm just playing the Charmers, because Charmer plus anything is going to be Spellcaster plus a monster. You're able to summon this. You count all the spells in both graveyards and in play, and then you get at least the 1 summon to bring back, like Verre or Hina, or even just a Witchcrafter that you can use during your opponent's turn. Or, of course, this thing is able to climb into Access Code Talker or Unchained Abomination easily as well. So that's why it's in here. It's more than just the glue to make sure things work there in an efficient way. Hopefully this kind of sheds some light on the way I thought about this deck and why I chose to go about it in this specific way. And with that, we've built Witchcrafter. Special thanks to anyone who watched the video in its entirety, or even the majority of it. I know it's a long haul even with that chapter system, so big thanks to you guys for sticking around here. We'll look at the main deck, and it's not quite alphabetical this time. It'll make sense, I think, but it's basically in order of priority, so should make it a little easier to build the deck with this tutorial here. We have one each of Witchcrafter Madame Verre, Heine, and Adele. Then we have 3 copies of Witchcrafter 𝗗𝗲𝗄. We have double Jenny, 1 pottery, and a lone pitoir as well. Then for our frames, we have triple gamma and 1 driver, and that's it for monsters. For spells, we have 3 each of Witchcrafter Creation, Unveiling, and Holiday, the most important ones there. Then we have 1 each of Witchcrafter Bystreet, Scroll, Collaboration, and Draping. And then for the other spells, we have 3 copies of Pot of Extravagance, triple Foolish Burial Goods, along with the 1 Metal Foes, Fusion, and 1 Upstart Goblin. Then we have Reasoning. This card's bonkers, and it's just really funny to play these days. Monster Reborn, and triple Super Polymerization to make the deck an even 40. Then for our extra deck, which really feels weird because it's never organized like this thanks to Extravagance, we have 1 each of the fusions: Earth Golem at Ignister, Mud Dragon of the Swamp, Predaplant 𝕮𝗔𝖊𝗑, and Starving Venom Fusion Dragon for that super poly. Then for link 1s, we have Link Kuriboh, Relinquished Anima, and Salamangreat Almirage. Then we have basically 1 of each of the Charmers, except I play a second area, obviously since it's the water monster and everyone's playing Needle Fiber or 𝗗𝗄𝗃𝗓, it's the most applicable. And then we have 1 copy of Selene, Queen of the Master Magicians, and then for link 4s, Access Code Talker, and Unchained Abomination. That's it for now, but feel free to grab one of these videos on your way out. If you really enjoyed what you saw today, remember to subscribe to JD Gaming for more Yu-Gi-Oh videos. Thanks guys, this is JD Gaming, hope you guys enjoyed as always, and I'll see you guys next time.